Hello, welcome to OJ Studios. Please enjoy this week's chapter of The Unknown by Lacey and Olivia Julius.
I can't explain, I said over to her. My heart pounded in my chest. If she was able to make me a girl and get everyone to forget who I am before, then I can only imagine what she would do to me now. Mrs. Whitaker raised an eyebrow. Her expression was one of bemused amusement. Explain, Tyler? It seems you've gotten quite comfortable in this new skin. She stepped forward, her cane tapping ominously against the tiled floor, the sound echoing in the frozen silence of the room. I instinctively stepped back, my grip tightening on Emma's arm. Please, I said, my voice trembling. I didn't ask for this. You took everything from me. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but her smirk remained intact. Took? No, child, I gave. You've had a week to experience life from a new perspective. A life where you've thrived, I might add. This isn't thriving. I snapped, my fear momentarily replaced by anger. You ripped me out of my life, my identity. I was happy with who I was. Mrs. Whitaker's smile faded, and for a moment, there was something almost unreadable in her expression. Happiness is a fleeting thing, Tyler. Happiness is subjective. Growth, however, growth comes from challenge. And you've grown, haven't you? I glanced at Emma, her frozen figure, a stark reminder of how surreal this moment was. My hands trembled, the weight of the past week pressing heavily on my chest. You don't get to decide what's best for me. What you did was cruel. Mrs. Whitaker tilted her head, her cane tapping again as she took another step closer. Cruelty is a matter of perspective. Tell me, Tyler, have you learned nothing from this experience? The friends you've made? The bonds you've strengthened? My mind raced. I didn't need to become someone else to do that. You manipulated my entire life for your own agenda. You didn't care about me or Emma. You only cared about control. Her smirk returned, colder this time. Control? Perhaps. Or perhaps I saw potential where you only saw simplicity. You were content to skate by, unaware of what true vulnerability and strength could teach you. I clenched my fists. You don't get to play God with my life. Mrs. Whitaker raised her arms with her hands clenched tightly into a fist. Suddenly,
I could feel myself changing. I looked down to see my old self returning. I began to grow with the dress and other clothes growing with me. My voice deepened as my chest broadened, the curves of Brooke's body giving way to the sharp, angular lines of my former self. The dress I was wearing stretched awkwardly against my changing frame. I almost had to laugh. I was the quarterback of the high school team, and yet I was wearing a delicate dress. My hands trembled as I looked down, my palms and fingers now larger and rougher. It was me again, Tyler. Mrs. Whitaker lowered her arms, her expression unreadable. There. Your precious identity has restored. But I wonder, Tyler, she said, her voice carrying an edge of sarcasm, will you value it more now that you've seen the world through someone else's eyes? I staggered back, the weight of the transformation, and the week I'd just endured, hitting me like a freight train. I was me again, but the experiences, the emotions, the connections, and the strange lessons of my time as Brooke lingered like an echo. I looked over at Emma, still frozen in time, her expression locked in a mix of confusion and concern. You can't just undo everything like nothing happened, I said, my voice hoarse. You've messed with lives, mine, Emma's. None of this is fair. Mrs. Whitaker smirked, leaning on her cane. Fair? Life is rarely fair, child. But it is what you make of it. I've given you an opportunity to see the world differently. What you do with that knowledge is entirely up to you. Can I ask you something? I asked, stepping closer to her. Why did you turn me into a girl for? Mrs. Whitaker's smirk deepened as she leaned on her cane, peering at me with an almost amused glint in her eye. Why? She echoed, as though the question itself were trivial. Because, Tyler, you had become stagnant. Comfortable in your ways. Blind to the complexities of the world around you. You saw strength as physical, leadership as dominance, and connection as mere camaraderie. I furrowed my brow, anger flickering alongside curiosity. So, you thought turning my entire life upside down was the solution? That doesn't sound like teaching, it sounds like punishment. She chuckled softly, a sound that sent chills up my spine. Oh, child, you see it as punishment because you're looking at it through the narrow lens of what you think you've lost. But I didn't strip you of anything that truly mattered. Your talents, your courage, your ability to adapt, those are still yours. What I gave you was perspective. Empathy. A chance to understand lives you dismissed or overlooked. Her words struck a nerve. The past week hadn't just been a whirlwind of confusion and frustration, it had also been filled with moments of clarity. Moments where I'd seen the world through different eyes, made connections I never would have as my old self. It wasn't easy to admit, but there were lessons in the chaos. You could have just talked to me, I said, my voice quieter now, less confrontational. You didn't have to do all of this. Mrs. Whitaker's smile softened, though her sharpness remained. Would you have listened? Truly listened? Or would you have shrugged it off, too confident in your certainty to entertain the idea that you might have something to learn? I opened my mouth to argue but stopped. Would I have listened? Would I have taken a lecture about empathy and perspective to heart? The Tyler from a week ago would probably have laughed it off, maybe humored her but never truly absorbed the lesson. I still think it was cruel, I said, my voice steadier now, though tinged with resignation. But, maybe you're right. I've learned things I didn't know I needed to learn. And I can't unsee that. Mrs. Whitaker nodded, her expression turning almost gentle. Growth is often uncomfortable, child. But it's necessary. I don't expect gratitude, Tyler. Only understanding. She sat down in one of the chairs and I did so, making sure to sit properly in the dress. Look, Tyler, my life on this earth is getting close to an end. I've been watching you and I know you know about how I got my powers. She paused, her voice dropping to a softer, almost wistful tone. The gods gave me these powers to protect, to guide when necessary. And in my own way, I've tried to do that. But these powers, they aren't permanent. They aren't mine to keep forever. When my time comes, they must pass on to someone worthy, someone who understands their weight and responsibility. I blinked, caught off guard by her sudden vulnerability. Wait, are you saying you're looking for someone to inherit your powers? Mrs. Whitaker nodded, the corners of her mouth twitching in a faint smile. That's part of it. These powers are not a gift, they're a burden. They require wisdom, empathy, and above all, perspective. I've spent my life trying to ensure they end up in the right hands. I sat back, her words sinking in like stones. So, turning me into Brooke was some kind of test? To see if I was worthy? Not just a test, she said firmly. An opportunity. One that you've navigated better than I expected. But I'm not saying you're destined for this role, Tyler. I don't know yet. You have potential, but you're still young. Impulsive. You've glimpsed what it means to live a different life, to walk in someone else's shoes. That is a start. I stared at her, the weight of her words pressing down on me. The idea of inheriting her powers, powers that had turned my life upside down, was overwhelming. Why me? I asked finally. What makes you think I could handle something like that? Mrs. Whitaker chuckled, her tone somewhere between amused and knowing. Because you've already shown that you can adapt. You've faced fear, discomfort, and uncertainty, and you've come out stronger. You've made connections, bridged gaps, and learned lessons that some people never grasp in a lifetime. That is a foundation. I hesitated, my mind racing. This was so much more than I'd bargained for. A week ago, I was just Tyler Matthews, a high school quarterback with a clear path ahead. Now, everything was uncertain, my future, my identity, even my purpose. Do I even have a choice in this? I asked, my voice laced with equal parts defiance and apprehension. Mrs. Whitaker's gaze softened. You always have a choice, Tyler. But remember, choice comes with consequences. If you choose to walk away, the powers will pass to someone else. Someone less prepared, perhaps. Or worse, someone who might abuse them. If you choose to embrace this path, well, it won't be easy. But it will matter. Her words hung in the air like a challenge, daring me to rise to it. I glanced at Emma, still frozen in time, her face a mix of concern and hope. She didn't know the full extent of what was happening, but I could feel her trust in me, her belief that I could handle whatever came next. I don't know if I can do this, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Whitaker leaned forward, her eyes boring into mine. You don't have to decide right now. But think about it, Tyler. Truly think. And when the time comes, trust yourself to make the right choice. She got up and walked over to me. This reality you have been experiencing for the past week isn't the true reality. It's just a simulation that I made and put you in. In reality, you're still asleep in your own bed and it's only been a few hours. Her words struck me like a bolt of lightning, and I felt a dizzying wave of relief and confusion. A simulation? I repeated, my voice barely audible. So, none of this was real? Mrs. Whitaker nodded solemnly. Not in the way you understand reality. The emotions, the connections, they were real to you, yes. But the events themselves? A construct, carefully designed to teach you what you needed to learn. To show you what it means to live as someone else, to struggle with their challenges and grow from them. My head spun with the implications. The week I'd lived as Brooke, the friendships I'd formed, the fears and triumphs, they were all part of a fabricated reality. Yet they felt so vivid, so deeply personal. My chest tightened as I thought of Emma, of the connection we'd shared during this strange journey. And Emma? I asked, my voice trembling. Was she real in this simulation? Did she feel what I felt? Mrs. Whitaker's expression softened. Emma was part of the construct. She acted as she would in the real world, shaped by the same feelings and instincts. But no, she won't remember any of this when you wake. For her, it will be as if none of it ever happened. A pang of loss shot through me. Emma's words, her encouragement, her kiss, they had felt so genuine. Knowing they were part of a simulation didn't diminish their impact, but it left an ache I hadn't expected. You said I have a choice, I said, my voice steadier now. To take on your powers or walk away. Does that choice come now, or later? Mrs. Whitaker stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. When you wake, the choice will not be immediate. You will return to your life, your reality. But the lessons you've learned here will remain with you. I will observe, Tyler. When the time comes, I will offer you the choice again. Until then, live your life with the knowledge you've gained. Her words carried a finality that settled deep in my bones. I looked down at my hands, still broad and rough, my hands. My body was my own again, but my mind carried the weight of an experience that felt far beyond my years. How do I know what's real when I wake up? I asked, my voice small. Mrs. Whitaker smiled faintly, almost kindly. You'll know, child. Trust yourself. And trust the journey you've been on. Growth isn't linear, nor is it confined to one reality. What you've gained here will guide you, even when the lines between truth and illusion blur. Before I could say another word, she raised her hand, and the world around me began to dissolve. Colors bled into one another, sounds became distant echoes, and I felt a tugging sensation deep within my chest, pulling me away from this constructed reality. "Goodbye, Tyler, Mrs. Whitaker's voice echoed in the void, soft but firm. "Until we meet again." And then, everything went dark. I woke with a jolt, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Sunlight streamed through my bedroom window, the familiar hum of the real world grounding me. I sat up, clutching my chest, and looked around. My room was exactly as I'd left it. My phone sat on the bedside table, buzzing softly with notifications. It was as if no time had passed at all. I glanced at myself in the mirror across the room, seeing my own face staring back. For a moment, I sat there, absorbing the reality of being Tyler Matthews again. But as I touched my reflection, the lessons of the past week, real or simulated, echoed in my mind. Empathy. Perspective. Growth. Mrs. Whitaker's voice lingered in my thoughts. "Live your life with the knowledge you've gained." I was no longer Brooke, but a part of me missed being her. Then I smiled a little. Maybe I could convince Mrs. Whitaker to teach me that spell early. I got up from my bed and walked to my closet to find my football jersey hanging where it always has been, no sign of the cheerleading uniform anywhere. The sight of my football jersey felt strangely reassuring. Its bold number and school colors seemed to anchor me back into my old life, a life that now carried a strange new weight. Yet, as I ran my fingers over the fabric, a peculiar pang of nostalgia flickered. The cheerleading uniform might have been a simulation, but the memories it symbolized were deeply real to me. I pulled the jersey off the hanger and slipped it over my head, the familiar scent of practice and adrenaline filling my senses. I grabbed my cleats and gear bag, feeling the comforting heft of my old routine return. Still, as I walked downstairs, a nagging question lingered in my mind: how much had this experience really changed me? Then my eye caught on something. It was a picture of Emma in her cheerleading uniform, and next to her was a girl with copper-color hair, green eyes, and a huge smile. "Hello, Brooke." I quietly said. This was the only proof I had of my week as Brooke Matthews, the seemingly unknown girl who turned cheerleader. The sight of the photo stopped me in my tracks. My chest tightened as I stared at the smiling girl beside Emma, Brooke Matthews, a name that felt like both a stranger and a part of me. It was surreal. A memento from a reality that wasn't supposed to exist, yet here it was, tangible proof that it had, in some form, left its mark. I picked up the picture frame, my fingers brushing against the glass. The memory of Emma's laughter, Shayna's teasing, and Bryce's warm smiles flashed in my mind like a montage. Brooke's world hadn't been real, but it had been real enough to teach me lessons I couldn't ignore. I couldn't decide if the photograph was a gift or a cursed fragment of a life I'd lived but couldn't truly call my own. "Brooke," I murmured again, the name tasting strange on my tongue. It wasn't mine, but it had been. For a moment, I felt an ache, not of loss, but of longing, for the bonds I'd formed, the challenges I'd overcome, and the new perspective I'd gained. "Tyler?" My mom's voice broke through my thoughts, startling me. I quickly set the photo back on the shelf and turned to see her standing in the doorway, her brows knit with concern. "You okay, sweetie? You've been standing there for a while." "Yeah," I said quickly, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about Friday night." "Well, we need to get you fitted for your suit, so get ready to go to the mall," Mom said cheerfully. And just like that, I was back in my old life like last week never happened. And I think I know what my choice for Mrs. Whitaker is going to be.